Take a breath. Not a forced one. Not deep. Just natural. The kind that happens when you finally stop rushing. The kind that tells your nervous system, you're allowed to be still now. Let your body relax without effort. No performance. No pressure to think, achieve, or fix anything. Just allow the quiet to return, gently. In this stillness, a question arises. Not loudly, not urgently, but persistently, like a soft echo in an empty room. What does it mean to be alone? We live in a hyper-connected world. Notifications, messages, timelines, meetings, calls. It never stops. And yet, in the spaces between these digital pulses, many of us feel an ache we don't quite know how to describe. That ache is not just disconnection from others, but from ourselves. We try to label it. We call it stress, boredom, emptiness. But sometimes, it's something deeper, something older, something more human. That thing is loneliness. It's time we talked about it. Loneliness isn't simply about being without people. It's about being without resonance. It's the feeling of being unseen, even while being looked at. Of being unheard, even when you're surrounded by voices. Of being unknown, even in a relationship where you're told you matter. It whispers quiet lies. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I'm not enough. Maybe no one will ever really get me. And what makes it especially hard is this. You can't always see loneliness in others. You can't always explain it in yourself. It hides well. Behind smiles. Behind productivity. Behind perfectly filtered photos and well-rehearsed conversations. But inside, it's a silence that echoes. It's a stillness that hurts. Some people feel it in the middle of a party. Some feel it waking up next to someone. Some feel it after a promotion, a birthday, or scrolling through messages that say happy for you. But deep down, there's still that echo. No one really sees me. Loneliness, when unacknowledged, becomes chronic. It attaches itself to your identity. You start believing it's who you are rather than something you're going through. And it doesn't always come from neglect or abuse. Sometimes it's subtler. A parent who provided food, but not emotional warmth. A friend group where you couldn't express your fears. A culture where sensitivity was seen as weakness. You internalize it. You adapt. You suppress. And loneliness becomes familiar. A background hum. Loneliness isn't just an emotional experience, it's physiological. The brain interprets loneliness as a threat, similar to hunger or physical pain. It activates the same survival systems, heightening stress, increasing cortisol, making you more vigilant, more anxious, more reactive. It's the body saying, you are missing something vital. You are in danger, even if you're sitting safely in your living room. That's why loneliness is exhausting. It doesn't just hurt, it wears you down from the inside. And yet, we rarely address it directly. We distract. We overwork. We scroll endlessly, hoping some post, some message, some hit of connection will make the ache go away. But it never does. Because the ache isn't solved by external noise. Loneliness isn't asking for more people. It's asking for more presence. It wants you to notice it, not to analyze or fix it, but simply to say, I hear you. When you do that, when you sit with loneliness like a visitor rather than a threat, something begins to shift. The ache softens. The silence feels less empty. And for the first time, you realize that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. There comes a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes striking, when you realize that being alone doesn't always have to hurt. That it's possible to be in a quiet room with no one around and feel not emptiness, but peace. This is where solitude begins. Solitude is not a continuation of loneliness. It's not loneliness improved. It's something else entirely. A different species of silence. Where loneliness is a lack, solitude is a presence. It's being alone with yourself, not against yourself. It's not about filling the space, but discovering what's already there. In solitude, the absence of others doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like a return to something softer, slower, older, a self you may have forgotten. You start noticing things again. The way the light falls across the floor, the sound of your breath, the texture of your thoughts, now less frantic. You remember how to be, not just how to do. It's subtle, it's slow, and it changes everything. But here's the truth, we don't arrive in solitude peacefully. Not at first. There's resistance, fear, discomfort, and that's understandable. Because most of us were never taught how to be alone without suffering. We were taught that silence should be filled, that boredom is bad, that aloneness is something to escape quickly and preferably through a screen. Even the language betrays us. We use alone as a negative state. We equate solitude with sadness, with social failure, with being left behind. But solitude isn't sad. Solitude is free. The problem isn't the silence. It's the fear of what we might hear in that silence. When the world's noise fades, we meet ourselves, raw, unscripted, unfiltered. We meet our insecurities, our regrets, our fears, desires, wounds, and patterns. And that meeting can be terrifying. That's why we open Instagram. That's why we binge watch. That's why we keep our minds full. Because silence has a way of showing us the truth. But here's what solitude teaches. You can face the truth and not be destroyed by it. The thoughts you fear are just thoughts. The discomfort is just sensation. The silence isn't the enemy. It's the mirror. And that mirror doesn't lie, but it also doesn't judge. Solitude doesn't demand perfection. It just asks you to stay. Solitude is an invitation, not to improve yourself, but to remember yourself. It says, you don't need to become anything else right now. Just be here. But to say yes to that invitation, you must first walk through the initial discomfort, the boredom, the agitation, the impulse to check your phone, the craving for distraction. You sit with all of it, not to get rid of it, but to let it pass on its own. And it will. Always. Every time you resist distraction, you strengthen your ability to be with yourself. And slowly, solitude becomes your ally. Not a void, but a resource. Not isolation, but intimacy. Not an empty room, but a quiet place where you remember who you are when no one is watching. Once the initial discomfort fades, solitude begins to reveal its gifts. And they are many. In solitude, you start to notice your own thoughts more clearly, not just the loud, anxious ones, but the quiet, wise ones beneath them. Ideas emerge, not as demands, but as invitations. You begin to differentiate your true voice from the voices you've absorbed, from culture, from family, from past versions of yourself. You remember what interests you when no one is watching, what calms you when nothing else is expected, what matters when no one is asking for your time, your smile, or your energy. In solitude, your creativity expands. You may find yourself drawn to write, draw, move, or simply sit and think without distraction, without pressure. Your inner world becomes spacious. Emotions can rise and fall without panic. You can observe them like weather, knowing none of it defines you, knowing that you can survive all of it. Solitude reminds you, you are enough, even now, especially now. You are not your productivity, not your usefulness, not your role in other people's stories. You are a presence, and presence, once felt, is healing in itself. Paradoxically, solitude doesn't distance you from others. It prepares you for deeper connection. When you are at ease in your own company, you stop approaching relationships from a place of lack. You no longer seek someone to complete you because you've discovered your own wholeness. You don't grasp, you don't chase, you offer. And from that grounded place, your relationships change. You begin choosing connection, not out of fear of being alone, but from a desire to share something already full. Your presence becomes cleaner. You listen more openly. You love more calmly. And you become better at recognizing which relationships drain you and which ones nourish you. Because you've tasted the difference. Solitude becomes your baseline, your home. From there, you can step into the world without losing yourself in it. Solitude also teaches you how to offer space to others. When you learn to hold your own thoughts gently, you learn how to hold another person's without control. You don't panic when someone pulls away because you've known the value of retreat. You don't force conversation because you're not afraid of silence. You don't demand closeness because your worth isn't measured by constant validation. This makes room for real intimacy, one that breathes, one that's built on trust, one that welcomes distance without fear. In relationships, romantic, familial, or platonic, solitude creates healthier boundaries. You know when to say yes. You know when to say no. You know when to pause, not to disconnect, but to return to yourself. The best relationships are not the ones that fuse two people into one. They are the ones where each person feels safe in their own solitude and chooses, freely, to meet in the middle. Solitude reminds us that love is not about merging. It's about meeting again and again without losing yourself in the process. Even after you've learned to embrace solitude, even after you've built a gentle relationship with stillness, loneliness will return. Not because you failed, but because you are human. There will be days when the silence feels heavier than usual. When you crave touch or conversation or even just someone asking, "How are you really?" There will be seasons, grief, change, illness, endings, where solitude doesn't feel sacred, but cold. When that happens, don't shame yourself. Don't say, "I thought I was past this. I should know better. Why am I back here again?" You're not back. You're simply moving forward with more honesty. Loneliness doesn't disappear forever, but your relationship with it changes. Before, you may have tried to run from it. Now, you can meet it with softer eyes. Sit with it. Offer it a chair. Let it speak. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to believe its stories. Just let it pass through. When you stop resisting it, you'll often find that beneath the loneliness isn't brokenness, but a desire to reconnect with something real. That desire is sacred, and it deserves attention, not avoidance. The deepest practices happen when it's least convenient, when the mind is restless, when the day has been loud, when you're tired of trying. That's when the smallest moment of presence matters most. Even a single breath, fully felt, can reconnect you to the stillness beneath the noise. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need to feel peaceful before you begin. Stillness doesn't require preparation. It only asks for your willingness to pause. You don't need to do it right. You don't need to feel something. You don't need to achieve enlightenment or erase discomfort. You just need to remain, without judgment, without expectation. That in itself is a kind of transformation. So now, let's return to the beginning. Take a breath. Not a perfect one. Not a deep one. Just real. Let your breath arrive as it is, and let it go without force. Remember what you felt. Not just the words, but the space between them. Loneliness and solitude may look alike from the outside, but inside, they carry different rhythms. Loneliness asks, "Where is everyone?" Solitude asks, "Where am I?" Loneliness is a hunger. Solitude is a feast you forgot was already yours. Loneliness is a room you're locked inside. Solitude is a room you build yourself and can leave at any time. Both are real. Both are valid. But only one leads you back to yourself. If you're in a season of loneliness now, don't rush to escape it. Just stay present with it. Because presence is the beginning of healing. And if you're rediscovering the joy of your own company, honor that. Return to it often. Let it become your quiet foundation. Because no matter how connected or disconnected life becomes, solitude will always be waiting. Not as a punishment, but as a homecoming. You don't need to chase it. You don't need to force it. You only need to stop running. Stillness will meet you halfway. And when it does, you may find that the silence you feared was never empty. It was always full of you.